Welcome to the Kenny Veach Cave mystery. Today I've got some small breaking news to share with you regarding the brother of Scott Nuttall, a fellow hiker searching for missing people. A key response to the question of, did Scott Nuttall plant certain items out in the desert when he was originally searching for Kenny, such as the tent and sword? And also the questions around what happened to the sword, how was it lost? Well, Scott Nuttall's brother has responded to some of my questions. I'm going to present it to you today. I'm going to read it out, and you can let me know what you think down below in the comment section. For those who may be watching this live premiere, welcome. Share your thoughts, opinions in the live chat box right inside of the screen. And anyone in general, you got questions, leave them down below under this video. You'll also find a pinned comment by me if you want to support this channel. And if you simply want to catch up on recent videos or my last one that I did about Kenny Veach, well, top right corner of the screen, click on that eye symbol, you'll be able to follow it from there, okay? So without further ado, let's get straight into the breaking news and comments. Here is where you can find the comments on the video titled Missing Person Search, Broken Arrow Pass, Abandoned Mine. Video posted 2 weeks ago. Scott Nuttall hasn't been as active on YouTube in recent time, but I believe that's to do with work and relocating to different locations. I think the last comment I read out was something to do with Scott working in Nevada. That could entail within the comment section here. So we go down to the very bottom. A user called Miguel 2 weeks ago asked, any new developments or plans to continue to look for Kenny Veach? Curious to know what your conclusion is on the matter. Thanks for the great content. And here's the response. So, Les Natal, the brother of Scott Nuttall, responds, speaking on behalf of Scott Nuttall, because, you know, the brothers, and they are around one another. And Les Nuttall has followed the Kenny Veach case in the past. He did follow my channel and, you know, showed positive comments, which is very good to see. But also Les Natal partnered with Scott Nuttall when searching for Dylan rounds, such as Bald Eagle Mountain, Montello, Nevada, and near to Utah. And I believe at that time, Scott Nuttall was working in Utah, so it enabled him. So depending where Scott is working at, that's where you can get in doing searches for missing people. So like Susan Powell as well. I believe that's in Utah. But in Nevada, it'll be Kenny Veach. Les Natal responds to Miguel saying, yes, but Scott Nuttall is experiencing car trouble. The area where Kenny Veach went missing is quite vast. We will be back there for sure. So both together. Now, in the past, at least what I was aware of, most of the hikes, if not all, when Scott Nuttall was starting out in the Kenny Veach case, hiking out there, he was by himself. But I do remember Les Natal making appearances when it came to the Dylan Rounds searches. Now, if people don't know the backstory behind Les Natal, one side of it is Les Natal has been searching for other missing people like Susan Powell in the past with the likes of Alan. I believe that they're good friends. Alan has a YouTube channel called Mountain Labs Fortress or something like that. Alan also works with Heavy D, the Diesel brothers. So you can see the connections there. They've got a good range and network of people. And Les Natal was, you know, working or assisting Alan in the past when they were trying to look at a certain mine shaft. And that's when Heavy D got involved with the whole Susan Powell case. And you had that really deep mine shaft and those bird nests all the way down. And it took some time to dig out, if some of you remember that. So they do have experience, extensive experience with hiking, being outdoors and searching for missing people. But on behalf of what's being said, Scott Nuttall has experienced car trouble. Now, is that just in general, or is it specifically to do with what's happened in the past when searching for Kenny? Because the likes of Joe May Road and some other areas off track, dirt roads, could be a little bit demanding and rough, punctures to tyres. I could understand that. I mean, other hikers have been, and I guess been somewhat successful, but at the end of the day, it depends what resources you have and what type of vehicle you have at the time. I do understand that. I remember kind of unrelated, but the Dylan Rounds case, there was some footage by JLR, some other YouTuber out there, who was in the area of Montello, Nevada, or Luton, Utah, going through on a dirt road with a rental car. I think it was a Mustang, and it was very rough and rugged, the roadway. You could hear the bumps and the clumps, the bangs as driving along. Well, just imagine what it would be like when you're searching for Kenny Veach, even worse, because you don't get as many visitors going down those dirt roads, and all the rocks and loose bits all over the place can be a bit of a hazard, either to yourself or the vehicle you're using at the time. But it's interesting that Les Natal confirms that he and Scott will be back out there searching for Kenny Veach at some point. Now, I thought it was a good time and opportunity for me to ask some questions, or at least attempt to, because in the past I did ask and didn't quite receive a response, or it took a bit longer. At the time, when I did reach out to Scott Nuttall, I asked him, and this is some time ago now, I asked him, "Hey Scott, what happened with the bamboo sword? Did you find out about it? Did you hand it over to the police? Did you contact the family about it?" And originally at the time, Scott Nuttall's response was, not really much has happened, no new developments, and I've lost it. That's what Scott said at the time, "I lost the sword." And if it is a key piece of evidence within the Kenny Veach case, to have lost it is a great shame. So I thought I'll just ask again, and with the addition of, the skepticism within some people in the case, I thought I'd ask that question as well. So I said, how was the bamboo sword lost when Scott Nuttall took it from Joe May Canyon? And as well, unfortunately, there are people in the community accusing Scott Nuttall for planting the tent and sword in the area. Les Nuttall responds saying, "Yeah, I know, they're accusing him of that. But he still got the sword somewhere, but he did not plant that stuff. There's always a naysayer." Okay, so it looks like Les Natal is already fully aware of the background chat going on and the skepticism behind Scott Nuttall. Take in mind, those viewers that are watching now who have only heard of Scott Nuttall because of the Dylan Rounds case may be quite shocked by these claims and accusations. But at the same time, people in the Dylan Rounds case haven't seen Scott Nuttall in the Kenny Veach case. What I can say is, because I've looked at it all around from start to finish, Scott Nuttall came into the Kenny Veach case, which I was kind of working on. And then when it came to the Dylan Rounds case, we both moved in the same direction separately. And that's when I came across his search videos for Dylan Rounds. And in just about all of them, nothing was ever planted. Okay, no items were planted there. So, being realistic, why should items supposedly be planted in one case but not the other? So we can get into that later. But Les Natal, I guess, just clearing the rumours, setting the record straight by saying Scott Nuttall has not planted anything and that the sword is somewhere. So I guess what that means is Scott Nuttall lost the sword, but it was still on him. Maybe in his property, in his vehicle or something. Les Natal, if you're watching, if there's ever any updates regarding where the sword is, like if it was found, okay, you say it's somewhere, but where is somewhere? Like in possession or in proximity to the individual that has it? Or was it like accidentally thrown away? There's a little bit unknown, uncertain, but how it's worded here, it's not exactly missing. I guess that's how it's being put here. Right, now, Les Natal says, "Yeah, we're going to search for Kenny Veach more. The northern part of Sheep Mountains is pretty rough." Okay. Some of you may be wondering, where did this skepticism come from? Who created these accusations and what was the catalyst and reasoning behind it? Well, I'll explain it to you right now. So when Scott Nuttall first got involved in the case, there was no questioning, there wasn't much complaints from people. But then when Scott Nuttall was searching in other areas away from where Kenny Veach was actually hiking at, there was some kind of suspicion there. And I can't remember everything, but someone like Jeff Clark requoted and mentioned how Scott Nuttall was claiming he received intel or information from a reliable source that there was another area to be searching or the true location, and that Kenny Veach was actually giving false directions and was actually hiking in a completely different area, such as when collecting pine nuts or going past certain vegetation. That Jeff Clark was highlighting with what Scott Nuttall said in the past, and with the footage recorded too, it came across as if Scott Nuttall knew more than other people did, but at the same time, it seemed more like misdirection and being in completely the wrong area. Was it done on purpose? Was it done as a distraction to confuse people, kind of like how Kenny Veach supposedly did himself? So Jeff Clark was a little bit cautious of that, because when it comes to locations, the relevancy of it, how does it link to Kenny Veach? And to be fair, where Scott Nuttall was hiking didn't quite link to Kenny Veach to that extent. And the example, I guess, was Pine Nut Road. That is away from the hiking area and away from where Kenny Veach went missing. Now, was that in correlation to the scent being found at Pine Nut Road? I can't quite fully remember. If it was, that might be why I made my video looking at that location, because I did use some of Scott Nuttall's footage at the time. Maybe one thing links with another. But what you can see is the development of the skepticism building. You got Scott Nuttall, in the eyes of some, a rogue hiker, going elsewhere, thinking outside of the box, but with additional information or knowledge that not everything is quite how it seems when Kenny Veach was showing his imagery of the area. But Jeff Clark is skeptical of that because it doesn't align with Kenny Veach's video, and there's a few inaccuracies along the way. So I can understand that, but I think what we've got to understand, there have been other hikers that have gone down Pine Nut Road, like SB Vega's Adventures. But I think the difference is with SB Vega's Adventures, why he's not criticised is because he, I think he's called Steve, is thinking outside of the box and just looking all over, ticking places off the list, which makes sense. But I guess in the process of that, it's the language, the wording behind it. I'm going to check here, I'm going to check there. It's not him saying, I have received intel from a family member or from a key contact in the background that I can't tell you about, but it suggests over this way or over here. SB doesn't seem to do that. So maybe it's just all down to language and wording, and that could be what causes skepticism in the first place in the eyes of Jeff Clark. But I can understand people being cautious in general because there's a lot of strange characters that come along. I'm not highlighting Scott Nuttall as one, I'm just simply saying in general, a range of different people come into the case, and a range of different people may have caused some kind of disruption or been cryptic in unnecessary ways, or claimed that they knew more when they didn't, like Gene Lakowski or Lakowski. It doesn't help. I guess it leads to trust issues, and then when people see the slightest of change or the slightest inaccuracy or a big claim made which doesn't link to Kenny Veach or the location, that's when people start doubting one another. And then when the next thing happens and then the next video, it's like taking a step back and wondering, is this really genuine or natural? So the tent and sword being found was at a later point, I believe. So the original point where Jeff Clark became skeptical of Scott Nuttall, for example, was when Scott was hiking in a different area, and that occurred first. So then what followed after that would have been met with more skepticism, because it's like a chain reaction. Once one thing has happened and you become cautious of or suspicious, the next action that follows, you probably react the same way. So, that's just how it is. And I guess Atari catched on to it as well with like what Jeff Clark was highlighting about the wrong location and a form of misdirection. But then with the tent and sword, exactly how to why they came to the conclusion that it's planted by Scott Nuttall, when in defense of Scott Nuttall, being realistic, is there any evidence to say that that's been planted by Scott? Is there any footage, any surveillance, any audio of Scott Nuttall planting the stuff there? No. But like what Jeff Clark highlighted, and maybe Atari at some point, or at least agreed to, was there's that possibility that Scott Nuttall could have planted the items in that like rock crevice and then started recording and then walked up to it. I think maybe there is a side factor as to why skepticism came out about this, and it's probably to do with exploring abandoned mines and unusual places on a YouTube channel who you'd be quite familiar with, quite a big channel. That person ended up participating in the Kenny Veach M Cave mystery case, searching for the M Cave. Came across a shaped one, couldn't give the location because his contacts, military, weren't allowed to reveal it public or he'd get in trouble. When the YouTuber went there and went into the cave, found an Area 51 sign, and then fast forward later when returning back to that same spot, a new sign was put up, restricted area, keep out. People online rushed to say it was fake, it was planted, but the YouTuber put it there and then hit the record button and then walked up to the location and reacted. And people's defense to those points and claims made was because some of those signs you can buy online from Amazon, fake signs. So that's the reason behind that. So if people strongly feel about it that way, with exploring abandoned mines and unusual places with a cave like that, then when they look back at Scott Nuttall, then they'll probably start questioning that as well. And I believe Scott Nuttall coming across the tent and sword occurred before exploring abandoned mines and unusual places got involved in the case, right? So that's the order. So Scott Nuttall going down Pine Up Road and other areas, skepticism from Jeff Clark and that building, and Atari catching on later. Then you got sword and tent found, everyone confused, perplexed by it. Is it to do with Kenny Veach? Is it some kind of killer of Kenny Veach or just some hiker out there, random? Then comes later exploring abandoned mines and unusual places. A rise of skepticism there from viewers in highlighting signs being faked, staged props. Then people hear about it and then think, let's look back at Scott Nuttall's footage of the tent and sword and wonder if that was staged and planted as well. So I think that's the order of how people started questioning the whole situation, okay? And there might be others, okay? I can't remember everybody's name, but the people that have gone on about it on a regular basis nowadays would be Atari and Jeff Clark. Now, I don't know if Atari will get frustrated by this video in how I've worded it, but I've seen directly from her comments, Atari and Jeff Clark strongly believe, or at least feel, that Scott Nuttall is responsible for planting the sword and tent in that rock crevice. And Jeff Clark's reasoning behind it mentioned that it's probably done so Scott Nuttall gets a boost in viewers so he can grow his channel and benefit off of that growth. And yet, Les Natal, just recently, because I asked them the question, Les Natal, Scott Nuttall's brother, has confirmed that Scott did not plant anything. I know there's be people in the background that will say, well, of course the brother will defend the other brother because they're looking out for one another and related, and that's what loyalty does, and you just look out for one another. But what I would say is, as an outsider, is those that claim Scott doing foul play within the case, do you have any evidence? Do you actually have evidence? Because like when it comes to exploring abandoned mines and unusual places, people's evidence to put the argument across as it's staged was those signs, fake ones, online from Amazon, right? That's what people were claiming and stating there. But for Scott Nuttall's situation, a tent and sword, yeah, you can buy them online, but anyone can. Is there any link or any evidence to say that Scott bought those items? No evidence. Is there any footage or audio to capture Scott Nuttall planting those there before he does his recording for his video? No evidence. There is no evidence. Unless you find evidence to suggest otherwise, not much happens, right? So Les Natal has, I guess, squashed those rumours. My question to Jeff Clark would be, with Jeff Clark's mindset being that Scott Nuttall did what he did, planted stuff so he'd get attention, views, and grow his channel, then why didn't Scott Nuttall capitalise off it then, okay? Because you didn't see Scott Nuttall finding many more items, it was just mainly the tent and sword. So that says something, right? If you kept coming across more and more things, it could come across as if, right, first video worked, let's keep it up. That wasn't the case, because with Scott Nuttall, eventually, he slowed down with the videos and then moved to Utah for work and then covered the Dylan Rounds case. And from my experience of the videos that I saw, not once did Scott Nuttall come across anything unusual in the sense of trying to turn it into something when it's not linked to the Dylan Rounds case. In other words, out of the videos by Scott Nuttall when searching for Dylan Rounds, there was no staged or faked or planted items there, okay? There was more arguments towards Lance Kelly, Earthworm Infotainment, for supposedly planting stuff or turning things into something when they're not, like bones constantly being found, but they had nothing to do with Dylan Rounds, but it was made to seem that it was. But as for Scott Nuttall, he was going into mine shafts, he was looking about, going into the mountains, didn't really find much, didn't find Dylan Rounds, but definitely tried to, right? So there's a form of genuinity there. If Scott Nuttall planted stuff in the Kenny Veach case, you would think he would continue that pattern of behaviour, yet he didn't. And if the argument was it was to grow one's YouTube channel, what's happened since? Not much growth. No offence to that person's channel, but, you know, they're making videos when they can, they're not forcing them out, and they're not capitalising off of supposed growth, right? If we're talking about M caves, big M cave, little M cave on mountain, M cave up top, maybe there's quite a few videos like that on Scott Nuttall's channel, but at the end of the day, what else are you supposed to call it? You need the title to be relevant to either Kenny or the M cave, right? Because that's what it's all about. And if you literally come across a cave shaped like an M, regardless of the size, characteristics, how close it is to Kenny Veach's description, you will call it something M cave in the video, because that's what it is, right? If you just call it cave exploration or walking across a desert, who's honestly going to bother watching it? Not many. So you've got to make it relevant to the topic and case and be specific at times, even if it does come across as repetitive. So I understand that. So yeah, just wanted to present that to you today. Let me know your thoughts down below. You know, what's your thoughts on the people accusing Scott Nuttall for planting stuff out there? And if you've got any questions, you can list them down below. The one question that I have, such as towards Atari, okay, I can always do a follow-up video on this. I'll take that in mind. But I saw recently Atari stated that many items have been planted out in the desert within the Kenny Veach case. To state it as many items have been planted is quite a strong statement to make. My question to Atari is, you say many. Could you give a list of the many items planted out there? If you could bullet point down below in a comment, that would be appreciated. Because when I look back, and from what I can remember from my memory, if items were to be planted, regardless of who it's by, how many are out there? So if you want to list it as the tent and sword by someone, you want to mention the crystal skull. Planted, maybe. But what else? The phone, the coins planted by Kenny Veach to stage his disappearance, maybe. So maybe things have been planted, but in what way? Foul play, planted stuff, planted misdirections, planted items to assist people, if we're talking about that cache, which had the firewood, the food and water near to the mine shaft with that sign going across it. Rest in peace, Kenny Veach, as it said. You know, I mean, there was like some coins or something planted near the mine shaft, but that was by Jay Silverheels in the past to honour Kenny Veach. There was a beer can planted near those caves just before Picture Canyon, but that was by Jay Silverheels to honour Kenny Veach. So, is this the list of many items planted, or are there more, as Atari claims? If you could clarify and elaborate that down below, Atari, in the comment section, that would be appreciated. Me personally, I wouldn't say many items have been planted out there. You could argue and say a few, right? But it depends what other mysteries we're talking about here, right? And in what way, how they were planted, for the right reason or the wrong reason. And even if items were supposedly planted, I'd argue and say by a range of different people, possibly, right? So I think we need further clarification on that. I'll await a response. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Be sure to like and share it so more people hear about this breaking news from Les Nuttall's response in defense of Scott Nuttall, and also highlighting that they will be searching for Kenny Veach once again at some point in the future. Goodbye for now. I'll see you later.